Good morning, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Over the Lines. I'm Arton James, author of the upcoming football novel Foul that's out tomorrow. I'm joined today by Kieran Maguire, football finance expert, or so I would call him, senior teacher in accounting and finance at the University of Liverpool, where he also runs the Football Industries MBA, and he is author of The Price of Football, an excellent book on all things football finance. Thank you for joining me, Kieran.
Thanks for the welcome to the show, Arthur. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, no problem at all. So tell us a little bit about, well, like I said, I've heard you on your own podcast. Your podcast is excellent, by the way. I've heard you kind of shy away from the term football finance expert, but it seems to be what everybody wants to call you at the moment because of your commentary. Let us know a little bit about how you came to be in the position that you're in.
Well, like most things, it's a bit of luck and an element of accident. I was teaching at a bank who were advising the Glazers in respect of the Manchester United takeover. I think it was 2005, and so I was at the university at the time, and we used to do a bit of external work as well. And it was the day the deal went through, and sort of midway through the afternoon, because it was going to be announced in US time, about 2:00 in the afternoon, all the shutters went across the windows, and 4 huge bouncers appeared at the front door of the bank. I'm going, what's going on here, boys? And that they were then able to sort of reveal the nature of the story. So I had a bit of a chat with them at the time, and the BBC phoned up the university and said, we don't understand what's going on. Could somebody explain this? And the university press office put the BBC onto me. So as I knew a little bit about the deal, I was talking to people, and this was everything that was in the public domain. So that's how I first became involved in the media with regards to that. I've always used football as from a teaching point of view. I've been teaching since the 80s. I've always used football as a vehicle to get people to understand the world of finance, because it's something that we've got an emotional investment in. And I started to do that more and more. And then Liverpool University asked me to go across there to become involved with their MBA course, and since then things have exploded. Partly on the work of the Swiss Ramble, who's as far as I'm concerned, he's the main man in football finance, but he's not keen on in media work and things of that nature. So I've just sort of ended up doing it. There's a few of us. Rob Wilson at Sheffield does it as well, but there's not many people who've got an enthusiasm for the numbers. So it's an accident, but as somebody that's football mad, it's a good accident for me.
Yeah, very much so. And you said that things are going crazy for you at the moment. I guess we're in uncertain times, and there are lots of interesting financial things going on in the world of football.
Yeah. I mean, we're not yet at the end of July, and I keep sort of a little notebook on things, which will come as no surprise to anybody that knows my tales of spreadsheets. I've done 450 media slots this year, 2020 to date, and there's something breaking. Most of it bad news, some of it good news, but there's stories breaking all the time. And the media organisations, radio, TV, and print, they are keen to talk to people, to try to get an explanation. And also, to be fair, in the age of social media, fans are really keen to engage. Ultimately, I just think I hate the word expert, because I don't consider myself to be one. I'm just a football fan with a big calculator, but. Fans want to engage, and fans want to know more about their clubs, and about the security and the future of their clubs. And I'm quite fortunate. I'm in the position whereby the nature of my work is I'm researching clubs all the time, so I can sort of go out there and try to put stuff across in ways which makes it comprehensible to people who are on the other side. And Twitter's actually very good for that, because it forces you to condense things into 280 characters. So I've sort of been a beneficiary of the rise of social media.
and whether it's 280 characters or something longer form like the book is extremely accessible. Like, I think that you've written something, if you wanted to find your club's financial statements and do some basic analysis of them, I think that if you studied your book, you would be able to dissect them, which is a fantastic thing to have out in the world as a product available for a layperson off a shelf.
Yeah, I was really keen, but when I was originally asked to do it, I didn't want it to be an academic textbook. I've read Soccernomics by Szymanski, which I think is a really good book. I've read The Secret Barrister, which sort of explains how the legal system works to people like me who aren't in the legal system. So there's a lot of myth about finance, and accountants and bankers have a vested interest in overcomplicating things, because that helps to preserve their mystique, and that's why people pay them lots of sums of money. So I tried to make it a football finance for non-finance people book. It was also aimed at my students, because there wasn't a book for the stuff that I teach. So they were constantly moaning at me, what we want to read, we want to understand more. There's nothing out there. So with a heavy heart, I mean, it took me 2.5 years and 3 complete rewrites to get it finally out there. And then, of course, the pandemic turns up and you can't buy it in shops. So it's been a bit frustrating, because my target audience was a football fan who wanted to know more about their football club. But sales have been good. It did get #1 in the Amazon Sports bestsellers for a while, so that was pleasing. And I don't make any money from it, because with the rise of the pandemic, I just felt it was inappropriate for me to be benefiting financially when other people are suffering. So all the money, all the royalties go to Trustful Trust, which is a fantastic food bank charity.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I didn't know that. Fair play, Kieran. So I'm going to start this off. Like I said, I have read the book, but I want to start this off asking questions that fans ask, without any financial knowledge, really. Where does all the money come from in football?
Well, effectively, if you think of it as a bath, there's a variety of taps. And some of those taps are on a bit faster than the others. So in the Premier League, around about 60% of money comes from broadcasting deals. Regardless of what team you support, the Premier League is a really smart organisation when it comes to marketing itself. So we've got our domestic TV deals with Sky, BT, to a lesser extent the BBC and Amazon, which bring in just over half the money these days. And then there's the international deals, and what the Premier League was really smart at was, when the Premier League was set up in the early 90s, it went to overseas countries and said, would you like to have our football effectively for nothing? And it gave away the rights, or effectively gave away the rights. And then 3 or 6 years later, however long it was, when those rights were up for renewal, if you were in Thailand, Indonesia, Nigeria, Australia, even the US, because it was free, it effectively built up an audience, and the broadcasters realised that it kept people from cancelling their subscriptions. So the broadcasters were therefore prepared to pay for it, and on the back of that, the Premier League has grown and grown. It is the most successful team sport from an international perspective on the planet, and sometimes fingers are pointed at the administrators at the Premier League, but on this one, you've got to say they got it absolutely right. So TV is the biggest generator of income in the Premier League. It's for many clubs in the Championship. It's also the biggest generator of income, because they get money from both the Premier League and the EFL deal. Then, of course, there's us as fans. We turn up and we buy our tickets. In the Premier League, it's probably about £1 in every 7 comes through the turnstiles. But
Right.
as you drop into the lower leagues, that proportion grows and grows because of the decrease in the value of the broadcasting money. And then there's sponsors, and and personally, I'm very old school. I don't particularly want to have somebody's logo splattered across my football shirt, but the front of shirt sponsors and also the shirt manufacturers themselves are prepared to pay huge sums. Leeds United have just been promoted to the Premier League, and they've signed a 5-year deal with Adidas, which will be very lucrative because they've always sell big numbers of shirts. And of course, the Manchester United deal, which sets the gold standard as far as this country is concerned, again with Adidas, is very lucrative. So I put all of those numbers into big spreadsheets and sort of just throw those out for anybody that's interested in consuming them. So those are the main sources of money. Then we've got sort of peripheral things. You've got player sales. Player sales are very erratic. I think a classic example to give of that is if you take a look at Crystal Palace last season. They effectively lost £100,000 a day for 364 days of the year, which is a scary way to run a business. And on day 365, they sold Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and that completely wiped out all their losses. So that's another source of money. And then because football isn't like any other industry, we've got the owners of the clubs, the people like Abramovich, who last year put £250 million into financially subsidising Chelsea's transfer strategy. So all of these taps and together they put all of the money into the game, and yet the game still in the main loses money.
You've brought me nicely onto what I was going to ask next. How is that possible from a from a layperson's perspective? It does seem odd that we hear, these large figures touted everywhere we look and listen, and yet this seems to be the truth of the matter, that the game loses money overall.
Well, if you're looking at profit or loss is money in, less money out, and the thing with football is the money going out of the game is incredible. The average weekly wage in the Premier League is around about £3.5 million a year. Per player. So you multiply that by a squad of 25, and that's a big sum going out. Mm-hmm. Even if we drop into the Championship, the average annual salary is around about £800,000 a year. And in the Championship, for me, it's the most exciting league in Europe because of the unpredictability of it, and also, even if you've had an awful Saturday, inevitably you're playing that following Tuesday as well. So the recovery time before the next match tends to be much shorter. Mm-hmm. But in the Championship overall, for every £100 that comes into the game, £107 is going out on wages. So that's before you take into account paying for transfer fees, paying for transport, paying for the maintenance of the stadium, paying to send out stamps on season ticket. So it's lost money before it started. And
so how is that sustainable over time?
Well, we've been saying, and this particular relationship, I think I've done the numbers. For the last 6 or 7 years, the Premier League has spent more. Sorry, the Championship has spent more money on wages than it's generated. So, on the face of it, it is unsustainable. But what we have in football is that we have a sugar daddy culture. Mm-hmm. So there are so many people who buy football clubs who say, well, yes, it's going to lose money, but I'm you've got to be a multi-millionaire, to be honest, to survive in the Championship. I am a multi-millionaire. I am prepared to write out a check for however many thousands of pounds a week. And it's just an indulgence. Football has become a rich person's plaything. Mm-hmm. In the top divisions. Now, once you drop into Leagues 1 and 2, there's less emphasis on that. The clubs in the main, there's more clubs that are being run on a break and even basis, but even so, some are big losses. I mean, I was doing some work in respect of Bristol Rovers, and that's a reasonably well run club. And yesterday somebody asked me to calculate some numbers, and they're losing 70 grand a week, and this is for a club that you think, well, they've not got any superstars there, so how can they be doing that? Well, footballers, even in the lower league levels, are on salaries which are far in excess of the average salaries here in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I know, I've like I say, I've read the book. I do understand it, and still there's a kind of cognitive dissonance that goes on when you're so familiar with the figures banded around. It still doesn't quite all fit together, I think, for me and lots of people. So in terms of clubs that actually work, like, who are the most successful club maybe in England and the world?
Well, at present, but I think this is about to end, over the course of the last decade, I would say it's been Spurs.
Right.
Because what Spurs have managed to do is to become a big six club in terms of income, but not really a big six club in terms of wages.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had the benefits of being in the Champions League. I mean, getting to the final of the Champions League last year for Spurs was worth close on 100 to 120 million pounds, which is an amazing sum of money for what we see as just a cup competition. But their wage bill is it's less than half of that of the likes of Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City. But Spurs qualified for the Champions League. They got they were in the top four in the Premier League. They got to the final of the Champions League as well on a very low budget, and they've managed to do that year in, year out. And I was going to say that on the back of their new stadium, which I think is the most stadium in the world in terms of the ability to extract money from a very good example. In the Premier League, but players from England. So if you look at the majority of the squad, it's a far more domestically based squad than that of the other clubs in the Premier League. So they've got players who they've recruited from the Championship, the likes of Chris Wood and Ashley Barnes and Jeff Hendrick and so on, who have gone on to done pretty well for them. And I know that the Burnley wage structure, it's one of the lowest wage bills in the Premier League, and yet they always do pretty well. And they've got no superstars in the team. So whereas I don't like naming names, but I know that in some dressing rooms, in clubs in the Premier League, you might have 3 or 4 players on 100 to 140 grand a week, and the majority of the players are on 40 to 50. And if those players deliver, then there's no resentment. But if those players turn out to be a bit rubbish, that can actually create disharmony in the dressing room. Whereas at Burnley, everybody's on a really tight range. If you're in the first team squad, everybody's within 5 grand a week of each other. And that's actually quite good because they see themselves very much as a team. So I think their strategy is excellent. As you drop down the divisions, I think there's some really good examples. Shrewsbury Town are one, Burton Albion are one, Accrington Stanley with Andy Holt is great. I mean, Andy is a fantastic guy who bought into his local football club to prevent it going out of business, simply because he didn't want to see his town lose some of its identity. He wasn't actually a fan of the club, and he's run the club now for the last 3 or 4 years very, very well. But I think he's an example of people who become disillusioned with football. If you talk to Andy, who's an absolutely fantastic guy, I've met him on a couple of occasions. I think he's just been ground down by some of the other activities that we see in the game.
So they're the teams that are working well. We're seeing a glut of It seems like a lot of clubs going into administration at the moment. Will you speak a little on that?
Well, clubs go into administration to protect themselves from their creditors. Effectively, it's because they know that they can't pay their bills. Now, we've already discussed the championship in the sense that it's not sustainable unless you have the support of sugar daddies. What we have seen as a result of the pandemic is that the sugar daddies themselves have run out of money because they've got other businesses which aren't necessarily doing so well. So football was in a very, very poor position to potentially survive a shock, even a small shock to the business. So we saw what happened in 2005 was 2003 with the fall of ITV Digital. That had a huge impact upon administrations at the time. The pandemic is the biggest hit to all aspects of life for the best part of a century. So football was not in a good place to survive it. I think actually it's done remarkably well. That to date, only one club, Wigan Athletic, has gone into administration, and that's nothing to do with the pandemic. That is to do with unusual relationships between people in the Far East, and we need to get to the bottom of that in due course. So football has done well on the back of the furlough scheme, on the back of the delay repay scheme set up by the government. And I'm not party political, but this is a scheme which has helped clubs survive, and I don't think that can be denied. My fear is, how is the industry going to come out of the pandemic, because we don't know what the reset is going to be. If the government says you can't have more than 30 or 40% of people attending matches because of social distancing rules, then those clubs who are more dependent upon match day income, and that tends to be the case in the lower leagues, they are going to have huge challenges. Also, the TV money is going to be down because broadcasters are demanding and football club, well, you've just had 4 months potentially of no sales yourself or no production. So the last thing you want to be seen to be doing is sponsoring the local football club where half of your employees are on furlough, or you're having to announce redundancies. It just doesn't look good. So I'm more concerned about when football returns in the lower leagues than I am at the current position. At present, we're in a form of deep freeze, a form of sort of hibernation. But you're coming out of hibernation in September, October, November, whenever it's going to be, and we're coming into a world where it's going to be so much more difficult to generate income.
Another big thing that seems to be going on at the moment, but I'm guessing has been delayed by COVID, is the sale of a big Premier League club. Can you tell us a little about Newcastle's situation at the moment?
Yes, I mean, Mike Ashley is, in my view, he's not a good guy, but I don't think he's as bad as some people paint him out to be. He inherited Newcastle when, from a financial perspective, it was in serious danger of struggling for survival. He has tidied things up. He does run a fairly lean ship, but he's difficult to like. Is Mike Ashley? He's very smart. He's not got much time for people in terms of niceties, and he hasn't understood Geordie culture. So the club actually wants not just to get his money back, but also to make a bit of profit on the deal. So the club has been touted around, and the present position is that they've exchanged contracts with the Saudi PIF, the investment fund there, who's going to buy 80% of the club. Amanda Staveley, who is sort of broke to, I think, are some of the richest guys in the country, they're buying 10% as well. And I think one of their sons is going to be on the board. So that was the proposal. But before you can buy a football club, you have to you have to pass what is referred to as the owners and directors test. And the owners and directors test has two elements. First of all, have you got proof that you can fund the club, that you can finance the club? It's not a problem for the PIF. It's probably one of the richest funds on the planet. The second issue is to do with, there's a list of sort of prohibited things that you've done. So if you're a sex offender, if you're a criminal, if you've had bankruptcy in the last X years, and so on. So there are things of this nature. And what appears to be the sticking point with regards to the Saudi acquisition is that there is a Middle Eastern dispute between Saudi and Qatar. And one of the Saudi government has been accused of doing is setting up a pirate TV station, because the Qatari authorities from beIN have the Middle Eastern rights, which they pay the Premier League a huge sum of money. So it all revolves around that. And I think there is a view that if it can be proven that the PIF is also connected with this satellite pirate station, then that would prohibit them from being able to buy the club. But this has been dragging on for far too long. If the Premier League can't prove it, then they need to come up and just say, well, let the Saudis over. And if the Premier League has compelling evidence to that there is a link, then they need to say thanks, but no thanks. We don't want you to be buying one of our clubs. All that we're getting at present is delay and confusion, and it's not fair on the fans of the club. It's not fair on Steve Bruce. He's trying to plan for next season. He doesn't know whether he's be the manager. Doesn't know whether he's got a Mike Ashley budget or a Saudi Arabian budget, and I think we both know the difference involves a couple of zeros there. So it's a mess, and people want clarity and they want a quick decision, and that's what we're not getting at present.
No, it'll be interesting to see how it concludes, because as you said, one of the main streams of revenue into a club is from the fan base, and Newcastle have a massive fan base. Obviously got the large stadium there. They could with a massive cash injection potentially be something like a Manchester City.
Yeah, exactly. So I think financial fair play will stop. It will prevent Newcastle United spending to the same extent as Manchester City under Mansour or Chelsea under Abramovich, but they will certainly have a far more competitive budget than they would have done under Mike Ashley. And they, conceptually, they would be in a position to start to challenge the so-called Big Six. We've already seen Wolverhampton Wanderers do that to an extent, and I think Wolves are they're a great team to watch, as well as being very successful financially.
So you touch upon financial fair play there. So I understand how it would slow down the gain of, say, Newcastle if this takeover were to happen on the Big Six. In your book, you talk about financial fair play in a way that I've not really seen it addressed before. As a naive fan, I always believed that it was kind of for the good of the game to kind of limit the power at the top of the game. But you have a different take on it.
Well, I think there's a lot of politics in European football, which has been the driver ultimately of financial fair play. The so-called big clubs were some of the biggest fans of financial fair play because they saw the rise of PSG, Chelsea, Manchester City, and so on as being a threat to their effective monopoly of trophies, but also places in the Champions League. Financial fair play is anti-Manchester City. I don't think that is the case. It's anti the creation of another Manchester City. It will cause more of an issue for Newcastle than it will for Manchester City, because Manchester City they're already over the line. They're the elite gang, and they qualify for the Champions League every year. But if you take a look at the initial arguments for financial fair play, it was to reduce debt in European football. And my view, first of all, is that debt's it's not necessarily a bad thing. I've got a mortgage. It doesn't mean that my life's terrible just because I've got a mortgage. But being able to be able to make your repayments on debt is the key issue. But you look at PSG and Manchester City. Well, neither of those clubs have got any debt, and yet they've been before the financial fair play finger waggers more often than other clubs. So it's nothing to do really with reducing debt. UEFA themselves like to be very congratulatory about their achievements. They said that when FFP was introduced, clubs in Europe were losing money, and now they're breaking even. And I think they're entitled to some credit for that, but they carefully ignore the fact that over the course of the last decade, the broadcasting deals for European football, both domestically for the major leagues, but also the Champions League deal itself, that those deals have gone through the roof. So clubs are losing money simply because they're generating a lot more money. They're generating far more money than anybody would have anticipated achieved. I will give that. But the actual implementation of the rules and all of the get-out clauses as to what you can do, they have proven to be a goldmine for accountants and lawyers who are very smart. Clubs will employ very smart people to look after their interests. And as we've seen with the Manchester City UEFA ban being overturned by CAS very recently, that they will find weaknesses in the of the prosecutors. So what we have at present is a mess. The chip has just finished. The other EFL leagues have just finished, and we don't know who's being relegated out of League Two into the National League, because the EFL have appealed against the points deductions for Macclesfield Town. If Macclesfield Town, I think, get another 2 points deducted, they end up being relegated. So what's going to happen? Relegation is going to be decided by accountants and lawyers. If we take a look at the Championship, Wigan have just a 12-point deduction, and I said to you earlier, Wigan's administration has nothing to do with COVID. It is all to do with strange relationships between people in the Far East. No sane person would have bought Wigan Football Club for £41 million, because it's not worth that. At the start of June, and then they wouldn't have closed it down 4 weeks later. And have the risk of administration, because if you drop out of the Championship into League One, you're losing huge amounts of money, because the TV deal is so much poorer in League One. So we've got that's another asterisk. So I've got 2 asterisks there. We've then got Sheffield Wednesday, who could have a points deduction of up to 21 points. So therefore they could fall into the relegation equation. Derby County are also up for a charge. And these things, Sheffield Wednesday's charge is November 2019. So we've had, 8-9 months of no decision being made by the EFL's committee. Derby County were charged in January. Again, we're in July, 6 months later. Now, Derby could have, at one point, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they were genuine contenders for a playoff place. What would happen if they got into the playoffs? Then they, halfway through the playoffs, they get a points deduction. The whole thing is just
Right, welcome back. Experiencing some nightmare technical issues here. I don't know where exactly we left that topic there, Kieran, so we'll move on to something else. I wanted to ask, I listened to an episode of your podcast the other day, and you touched upon life after football for players, which I thought was a fascinating topic. And, having read some of the headline figures that are around, you're looking at anything from kind of 40 to 60% of footballers going bankrupt within a few years of retirement?
Yes, I think partly due to the fact that we become used to a lifestyle, and you spend what you earn, especially when you're young. And once that money dries up, there is a danger that players struggle to adapt to the change in lifestyles that they have. During their careers, many of them will have managers or agents who will be looking after their finances for them. But I know my podcast co-host, Kevin Day, he often gives the story of Neil Ruddock, who, a week after retiring as a footballer, he had a toothache and he didn't know what to do because he wasn't registered with a dentist, because historically everything in his life had been organised by the club. His agent had organised for paying his bills, the club had looked after his medical issues and things of that nature. So players aren't really prepared some of the time for life after football, and that's why if you talk to them, the guy I spoke to was a guy called Mark Lynch, who was always looking beyond the game. So he's had a successful business, but there's very high rates of bankruptcy, and also talking to players, because I teach footballers post career. With their, quite a few of them will sign up with courses for the LMA, for courses for sort of masters in sport and things of that nature. So I hop around from course to course, delivering the finance modules. They'll also tell you that things such as divorce rates are very high post the game, because it's a complete change of lifestyle, and that trying to replace the best thing, and everybody will tell you plays football, the best thing about football is the dressing room, that dressing room environment. And when that goes, the highs that playing football disappear with it, and actually it's quite difficult to replace. And there are genuine issues within the game as to players who have retired, they've moved on, and they struggle to come to terms with life outside, and that affects relationships, that affects their mental health and things of this nature. And we've seen far too many players have issues to do with gambling, with alcohol, with depression, with domestic relationships failing, and so on.
It's interesting that there are things like the PFA set up, and yet the incidence of this still seems to be extremely high. I don't know if you know of any moves being made to reduce this.
Well, the PFA does try to engage with its members in relation to things of this nature, but it's not easy, because if you are 23, 24, you've got a successful football career, when you're young, you're going to live forever. Nothing's ever going to change, and you think that this amazing lifestyle that you've got is going to be there. So therefore, the focus is, and also the focus coming from the clubs, everything is geared towards the next match. That's all that matters. You're going for a promotion. You're trying to avoid relegation. You've got bonuses. You're up against. You're going to Old Trafford, or you're going to Elland Road, or you're facing Chelsea at home. And things like, what am I going to do post career is an irrelevance, because there is nothing else in your world apart from the next match. And therefore, it's actually quite difficult for players to think, well, I need to think beyond this, because yes, I'm doing well at present, but this isn't going to last forever. I've got to try to get down better routes, perhaps do. Mark Lynch, the guy that I spoke to this week, he said he did his BTEC. He was always aware of his post-career life, but that itself might have impacted upon his football career. So he said, as a footballer, I had more lows than highs, and that's what we don't see as fans. We just see, and we don't. Fans always talk about loyalty. Fans aren't loyal to players. Fans are loyal to the shirt. If you have a player that has 2 or 3 off games, then all the rumours start. He's been drinking too much. He owes money to a bookie. Somebody's seeing his wife. It doesn't matter what team you support. I can guarantee you go onto the forums, you go onto social media, and all of these accusations start flying. His heart's not in it. All the nonsense. You've got no idea what this person as an individual is going through, and fans do not care about players. don't be fooled. We're the greatest fans in the world. With this, that, and the other. It's an absolute nonsense. We just see football as a vehicle to give us enjoyment, and if they fail to deliver, the fans turn on players very quickly.
Yeah, the resentment towards people earning far more money is pretty easy to drum up when things aren't going your way. I just wanted to start to wrap up with a few questions from people who follow my book. I've had somebody asking a fairly open-ended question about agents. Are agents taking too much money out of the game?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is to say yes, because if you look at things such as the Raiola deal in respect of Paul Pogba, he made, I think, £27 million, and potentially that could rise to 40 million from Paul Pogba's transfer from Juve to Manchester United. So there are some spectacular deals which are very good for agents. When I was researching the book, I contacted some people in the game, not agents. I spoke to an agents themselves, and there's good and bad, but then there's good and bad solicitors, there's good and bad accountants, there's good and bad doctors. So, and there was sort of a mixed views from there. But when I spoke to people who were chief executives of clubs, they just took the view that they were part of the game, and actually that they can be a force for good, because the agent acts as the intermediary between the player and the club. And if the player is feeling a bit unhappy about this, that, or the other, he might not feel comfortable approaching a chief executive because he might find it an intimidating experience or things of this nature. So therefore he has a word with his agent. And what was coming through was a lot of the time, by having good communication or lines of communication between the club and the agent, that can actually be to the best interests of the club, because it means the player ends up being happy, or the player stays for a couple of extra seasons, and the player gets extra money as well, and gets to feel that he's more worthy and more appreciated. So agents fees are huge. I think it was around about £250 million last year. Wow. In the Premier League alone. So people will look at that and they say, well, that's not justified. From the club's point of view, that they just seem to think, well, it's a way of doing business. Would they like agents' fees to be reduced? Well, of course they would. But if you buy or sell a house, I'm sure you'd like to go and pay your estate agent more. Or sorry, you pay your estate agent less. But that's not necessarily going to be the case.
Mm-hmm. One more question. I had a fan get in touch and ask if the only way to save the game is to implement something like the 50+1 rule in Germany.
Well, for those unfamiliar, the 50+1 rule in Germany, which I think is great, means that no one individual can own over half the club and therefore control it, unless they can prove a connection with the club for about 20 years. So we do see some clubs being run by sponsors or by individuals, but they've had a long relationship. So it stops sort of the fly-by-night club owners arising, as we have seen in the likes of Charlton, Bolton, Bury, and other clubs who have suffered or in the process of suffering at present. I think it would be a step forward in English football. I think it would make fans feel more protected, but I also think it's got zero chance of progressing, because for that to take place, there would either have to be a change in legislation coming from government, and the government's got bigger fish to fry than football at present, or the club owners themselves would have to vote for it, and the club owners aren't going to vote for something which reduces the extent of control that they have of clubs. So unfortunately, whilst I think the 50+1 rule has huge merits, that particular horse has bolted already. We are the English system, which has allowed the likes of Abramovich and Mansour to come in and invest hundreds of billions of pounds, so hundreds of millions, but include up to billions of pounds in the game, has made English football very attractive. So it has benefited some clubs, but I think for the game overall, it's made it very vulnerable.
Hmm. So I have one question out of left field. Obviously, I'm releasing a football novel tomorrow, and football fiction and sports fiction is not a particularly big genre. So I was going to ask you to rack your brain for your favourite. It could be a film or a book, piece of sports fiction.
Um, I guess it's got to be for me because I'm quite old. Escape to Victory. Uh,
Fantastic.
sim- Simply because to see Bobby Moore, Pele, Ozzy Ardiles, Kevin Beattie, I think, and Sylvester Stallone,
Yeah.
which was the crazy thing. Sylvester Stallone apparently was so bad because he was supposed to be the star of the movie, was so bad at football that they had to put him in goal in order he couldn't even kick it straight. So yeah, that is sort of growing up with a film of that nature was great for me. But it was complete nonsense as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
when I first saw it, I was a young lad, and it was it was good fun.
Yeah, I can understand how that would leave a lasting impression. So before we go, where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm the Price of Football website. I run that. The Price of Football podcast and Price of Football at Kieran Maguire on Twitter.
Hmm.
Twitter is sort of my main vehicle for getting things out, mainly because it's very immediate. The blog has taken a sort of a bit of a backseat simply because the amount of media work that I'm doing has expanded far beyond my expectations, and in an ideal world, far beyond the need as well. I'm the less people hear of me, the better the football industry is my opinion.
Well, while we do need to hear from you, your podcast is excellent, your Twitter's excellent, the book is excellent. As I mentioned earlier, the book I'm including in a bundle, a giveaway bundle in a competition. I'll include details of that below with all of Kieran's details. So thank you for joining me again. We'll wrap up episode 3 of Over the Lines here, and we'll be on soon.
Okay, and good luck with Foul, Arton.
Thank you.
Hope it sells by the bundle.
Thank you very